Hello and welcome to Arcadian. In my video on DMing lessons we can take from Subnautica, link in the eye up there or down below in the Underdark, I mentioned a story I've been meaning to tell for a while. It tells of my first ever TTRPG convention, which was coincidentally the first convention of the kind here in Portugal. It tells of the time I completely derailed a whole debate. It tells of when I made a whole convention hate me. And more controversially, it tells of why D&D is not a good game for telling stories. Let me begin this story with a shout out to some amazing people. It was 2018 and Roll Initiative, a group of Portuguese RPG streamers, arguably the biggest one at the time, had a very ambitious plan to host the first ever TTRPG convention in Portugal. Now, my country has a population of around 10 million. Because of this, even events dedicated at larger but still niche hobbies like Comic-Con can still struggle to attract enough people to justify investment and make ends meet. As such, we never had any TTRPG convention, at least none bigger than very local events hosted by local stores, and just the effort to try such a thing seemed impossible. But this passionate group of devoted friends wanted to start something unique and ended up creating the first Portuguese convention completely dedicated to TTRPGs, Roll Lisboa, which fortunately has turned into a yearly event and has even spread to other cities other than the capital. Roll Iniciativa, if any of you are watching this video, you guys are awesome. Because of my work as a manga author, I happen to be friends with some of the organizers, and they invited me to attend and play at the first ever D&D live play in Portugal, ran by the amazing DM Nuno Teixeira, which, not gonna lie, is one of my proudest achievements. And that's how I came to be at the first ever Roll Lisboa. And unlike what the intro of the video might suggest, I had a wonderful time. I met a lot of people, tried a lot of different RPGs, because at the time I only played D&D, and really enjoyed that group feeling of being among other fans of RPGs, among my people. Some of them, though, might not have liked me so much. The schedule for the first day of the convention had a debate planned for lunchtime. I don't remember the theme of the discussion. It quickly went sideways when I said something that ignited the rage of the whole audience. I don't even remember what prompted me to say such a thing. But I did say it. I uttered the forbidden words. I don't think D&D is the best game to tell stories. The reaction was immediate and visceral. This was a whole cafeteria of die-hard D&D fans who I just apparently insulted, and even those who were just quietly enjoying their lunch while listening to the debate quickly jumped to argue against me. And honestly, I can get their point of view, but at the same time I was quite surprised. I thought most people would agree with me. So here's my reasoning, the same I tried to tell everyone back then, which led to mixed results. D&D is not the best game to tell stories because not only it is a tactical combat simulator before a role-playing system, but also because it is controlled by the dice. I think the first part can't arise much controversy. Just look at the amount of combat rules and stat blocks in D&D and compare it to the meek amount of mechanics to support roleplay options and the almost non-existent guides to write compelling campaigns. That isn't to say that you can't roleplay in D&D or experience amazing stories with it, but arguably there are many games with much sturdier rules and systems for facilitating narrative. But maybe even more than that, I feel like the role of dice in D&D is detrimental to telling the best stories. When you're writing a great masterpiece, you need to carefully influence or even manipulate the feelings of your reader to draw forth the biggest emotional output. No sentence is ever wasted, no word is written without a purpose. Everything contributes to the goal of providing the best experience, or else it is unnecessary and should be cut out. But in D&D, the dice rule supreme. You can be in the middle of the most climactic battle of the campaign and have everything fumble just because you rolled a series of natural ones, resulting in a TPK and a very anticlimactic and unsatisfactory finale. Or the opposite, when finally face to face with the villain you've been chasing for so long, it's possible to kill them in a couple of rounds just because you were rolling lucky that night and the DM wasn't, making the final fight easy, cheap, and undermining all the effort until then with a vain and effortless victory. The others at the convention quickly rose to counter this argument, and I think I couldn't explain myself well afterwards. It's not like I don't think that defeating the boss easily can't be enjoyable, or that the possibility of a TPK shouldn't be ever present. But those are good for games, not stories, and those two terms are not interchangeable. A good story doesn't necessarily make a good game, and a good game doesn't always translate into a good story. In other words, if you take the most enjoyable D&D game you ever played in and write it into a book, I can't guarantee that it will be a good story, not even a passable one. Most good stories are about drama, but the chaos that the dice bring into the game can be responsible for killing that drama. The dice are impartial and don't know when a success or a failure would be more dramatic than the other. What results is a potentially good game experience, but a suboptimal story. And again, this is not to say that you can't live through great stories with D&D, but that's very different from saying that the system is supportive of that. Many other games excel at this much better than D&D. For example, one of my favorite mechanics of Blades in the Dark is the flashback. Basically, the player can gain points of stress, which is a negative resource that can give you a trauma, in exchange for a flashback. Suddenly, the character remembers something they prepared before the heist, which really is just the player improvising a solution that would have required previous preparation, and that preparation kinda becomes real in that moment. This is great design. Who doesn't love those plot twists in heist movies when a clever character reveals something they prepared pre-heist and suddenly that dangerous situation we thought they were into is 100% under control? Not only this mechanic is wonderful to reinforce the fantasy of a heist, but it is also extremely supportive of the narrative and of roleplay. Other systems like 10 Candles go even one step further and set narrative objectives for your character to achieve during the game. When you create a character in this game, you need to describe a moment for them, a climactic make or break moment which will either make them grow and renew their conviction or make them sink in despair. If you manage to conduct the narrative in a way that achieves the moment of your character, then they'll gain a boon for the rest of the game. These encourage the players to be constantly on the lookout for opportunities to play out their moment and try to gain that boon. Not only the system encourages the narrative makes the system. This is exactly what I tried to do when I revised every D&D ancestry into my own narrative-driven version. If you want to take a look at that, by the way, you can get it for free online. Just click the eye up there and look for the link to the DM's Guild. And these are just a few of the examples I know. There are hundreds of RPGs out there whose systems are much more supportive of narrative, some of which actually aim at telling the best story possible instead of winning or getting to max level or finishing the campaign. In those games, you don't win when you defeat Tiamat. You only win if you won in the most amazing and heart-grasping way possible. You can win even if you lose, as long as it was spectacular. Does this mean that D&D is not a good game to roleplay and live through stories? Absolutely not. Even despite everything I said so far, D&D is still my favorite role-playing game. I just slightly disagree if you say that it is the perfect game for telling stories. There are better options for that in the market. As a small note, one of the arguments presented against my point at the convention was that the dice's chaos is what enables improvisation, and that is also a great way to tell good stories. And when I replied, that might be true, but the best books are thought and planned before they are written, someone responded, Stephen King is a great author and he assumedly claims to write almost on improvise, which I thought was the snarkiest, most clever retort. This is a valid point too, and while I personally prefer architect writers over gardener writers, I agree that the improvisational nature of D&D is one of the things that makes this game so special, but I still think it's a matter of different goals. In D&D, there are many people writing the story between the DM and the players, and with many people pulling the narrative in possibly different directions, the overarching story can lose in conciseness and delivery. D&D is a game. It wants to provide a great gaming experience. The storytelling aspect of it is kind of a bonus, one that is intrinsically tied to the game, but still not its main scope. Some tables might not even like this aspect of it at all. It takes special skill to turn a D&D game into a great storytelling experience, on both the DM and the player's side. It's no mistake that the most famous D&D game nowadays is played by professional actors. On the other hand, literally anyone can run D&D combat. You just have to read the instructions of the game. But the thing is, that's fine. Even though D&D is ultimately an engine for combat and not roleplay, I personally value that storytelling and improvisational nature of D&D a lot. I strive to make each of my campaigns not only a great game, but an amazing story. I do it despite knowing that this is not the best system for storytelling. But I like playing D&D. I can keep playing despite recognizing this. It just means that I know the limitations of the tools I'm using. And once in a while, I'll try a different game and learn some new ways to run RPGs. Sometimes I try to incorporate some of those elements in my D&D games as house rules, like the flashback from Blades in the Dark or the moment from 10 Candles. Maybe one day I'll find a game that I find so perfect for me that I drop D&D and start playing it instead. And with so many talented independent designers out there, that is not unlikely at all. So if you draw something from this video, let it be this. D&D is ultimately a system for tactical combat, where narrative plays a great part, but is not the main focus of the system. This means that great storytelling can be born from D&D games, but that happens more as a side effect due to the skill and drive of the players, and possibly of whoever wrote the campaign, than it happens due to the game's design. In short, you can tell great stories with D&D, but that's not a guarantee, because the system is not built around that assumption. But many other games are designed around this core pillar, so it's always good for you to try other games and see what you can learn from them. I already talked about Blades in the Dark and 10 Candles, but we're in the middle of an independent TTRPG boom right now. Critical Role is releasing 2 original systems of theirs. Matt Colville is currently working on his own high fantasy simulator. Personally, I can point you to Indestructible Boys Vagabond, which recently had a successful Kickstarter campaign and which I'm dying to get my hands on. Just try new games. You're guaranteed to learn something that will improve your game master skills. But what do you think? Do you also believe that the chaotic nature of the dice is an impairment to tell great stories? If you don't, please let me know in the comments down below what's your opinion. Maybe I can learn something from you. But if you do agree with me, maybe you'll like this other video of mine where I talk about what is the real role of dice in D&D. As you might have guessed it, it's not to improve storytelling. And talking about dice, how about we settle the debate for good on whether the DM should fudge dice rolls or not? Link on my left as well. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up so other people can watch it too. That's all for me. Thank you for watching. I'm the first Arcadian. Feed me, Seymour.